I walked into that restaurant thinking maybe, just maybe, this was the moment things would turn around. Madison had been distant for months, cold in ways I couldn't explain, like she was always somewhere else even when sitting right beside me. But this invitation, it felt like a flicker of hope. Her message was simple: dinner at 7. My treat. Just you and me. No emojis. No kiss at the end. But I held on to it like it meant something. I put on the blue shirt she used to say made my eyes pop. Drove across town with my heart pounding like I was 20 again, headed to our first date. I told myself this was her way of saying she still cared. That maybe, beneath the silence and sharp tones, we still had something worth saving. But when the hostess led me to a private dining room, the air shifted. There were no candles. No soft music. No Madison. Just a single table, set for one. And on the plate? A white envelope. I swear, the second I saw it, I knew. Something was over. But I had no idea that night wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. If this story moved you, drop a heart or just type 1 in the comments. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can walk this journey of rising from the ashes together. Now, let's dive into this gripping story. The next morning, I stood at the bathroom sink, watching the mirror like it owed me an explanation. I looked older than I remembered, lines I hadn't seen before, eyes that used to be sharp now clouded with something heavier. Madison's side of the bed had been untouched. Again. It had been like that for a while now. She used to rest her hand on my chest before falling asleep, tracing circles with her fingers as we talked about plans we hadn't yet made. Now, she faced the wall every night like I was a stranger who just happened to rent the other half of the mattress. After the layoff, things had shifted. One day I was managing portfolios for high-profile clients at one of the top firms in Austin, and the next I was handing over my company badge to HR like it was just another Tuesday. I kept it together at first. Told myself it was temporary, that a guy like me, with 2 decades of experience and a solid reputation, would land on his feet. That was over 9 months ago. I'd applied everywhere. Startups, banks, even a handful of remote contract gigs. Most didn't reply. A few did, just long enough to say no. Each rejection chipped away at something inside me I didn't know was breakable. But it wasn't just the job loss. It was everything. Madison and I had been trying to have kids for years. She was obsessed with it, tracking cycles, appointments, diets, even weekly acupuncture. We burned through savings on fertility treatments. Every time the test came back negative, she'd look at me like my body had failed hers. And maybe, in some way, it had. Doctors weren't sure who the problem was. I offered to take more tests. She brushed it off. But the way she stopped inviting me to appointments, the way she'd return home without saying a word, it spoke louder than any lab result ever could. That's when the distance began to harden into something colder. A silence that wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Like she was building a case in her mind, collecting little pieces of my failure and filing them away. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She stopped making coffee for 2. She stopped calling me babe. And the eye contact? Gone. Completely gone. She'd talk to me over her shoulder, or worse, through text, even if we were in the same room. I used to catch her staring at her phone late at night, scrolling through something with this faint smirk on her lips. The same smirk she used to give me when I caught her watching me cook shirtless in the kitchen. Now, her eyes didn't even flinch when I walked in. Like I was a piece of furniture that used to mean something. I told myself it was just a phase. That the stress was wearing her down too. That once I got back on my feet, she'd come back to me. But deep down, I already knew better. It's strange how a man can feel alone while sitting right next to the woman he loves. Still, even with all the silence, I kept finding reasons to believe. There were small things, maybe too small to matter, but I clung to them anyway. Like the way she still folded my t-shirts the way I liked, or how my toothbrush never ran out without a new one appearing in the cabinet. She never said much, but I convinced myself that some quiet part of her still cared. That maybe she was hurting too. Just not the type to show it. I started replaying old memories in my mind, like worn-out home movies. The first time I met her, at a friend's engagement party in Dallas. She was standing by the drinks table, rolling her eyes at a guy trying too hard. When I cracked a joke from across the room, she laughed without even looking at me. That laugh, it had this reckless honesty, like she didn't owe anyone an explanation for her joy. That laugh changed my whole night. Maybe my whole life. Or our honeymoon, when we got lost driving out near Big Bend and ended up at a rundown diner, splitting pancakes and talking for hours. She called me her safe place that night. I remember it because she'd whispered it when she thought I was asleep. Lately, I'd been reaching for those moments like driftwood in open water. One afternoon, I found myself digging through the back of the closet, past old suits and dusty shoes, until I pulled out the blue shirt, the one she used to say made my eyes too dangerous to look at. I hadn't worn it in over a year. I ran my hands over the fabric, unsure why I was even holding it. That night, something changed. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone, when she spoke, flat and unreadable. "Dinner. Tomorrow. 7. Just us." I blinked. "Dinner?" "Yeah. I made a reservation. Don't be late." That was it. No smile. No explanation. She didn't even look up. But I stood there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Madison hadn't suggested anything for the two of us in months, not a walk, not a movie, not even a conversation that lasted more than 3 sentences. I nodded, pretending to play it cool, but my chest was a drumline. When I walked upstairs, I opened the closet and stared at that blue shirt for a long time. Some part of me, maybe the same part that stayed long after the love went silent, wanted to believe this was a turning point. That she had noticed how far we drifted. That maybe, despite it all, she still saw me. The next day, I spent nearly an hour grooming, shaving, styling my hair, making sure every wrinkle on that shirt was ironed out. Ridiculous, maybe. But it felt important. Like this dinner was a test I wanted to pass. A chance to get her back before it was too late. In the mirror, I almost recognized myself again. The sky had started to dim as I backed out of the driveway, that early evening hush settling over the neighborhood like a blanket. Streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I gripped the wheel a little tighter than necessary, my palms slightly damp, like I was heading to something important, like a job interview, or a courtroom, or the edge of something that could either save me or shatter me completely. The blue shirt felt snug across my shoulders. I'd dropped a few pounds in the past few months, more from stress than anything else, but I still remembered how she used to touch the sleeve and say I looked dangerously clean. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror at the first red light, clean shave, fresh cologne, the faintest hopeful curve to my lips that I hadn't seen in a long time. But underneath it all, something gnawed at me. That whisper of doubt that had become louder with every unanswered look, every short reply, every night she turned away without saying goodnight. I tried to shut it down, to remind myself that this dinner could be something. An olive branch. A first step. Maybe she'd been processing her own grief, her own disappointments, and just hadn't known how to include me in that pain. I knew I hadn't been perfect. The job loss had stripped more than income from me, it had taken something deeper, something tied to manhood, to identity. I used to walk into rooms and feel like I belonged. These days, I hesitated before opening my email. I hated that about myself. I hated that she had to see it. But I also knew I hadn't stopped trying. I got up every morning. I made coffee. I took care of the yard, handled bills, kept applying even when I didn't want to. I tried to show up in the ways I could, even when the old ways were gone. The closer I got to the restaurant, the more the city lights blurred in my vision. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. It was more like the pressure building inside had nowhere else to go. I took a deep breath and rolled down the window just a crack, letting the cool air hit my face. What if she had planned something thoughtful? What if it wasn't too late? Maybe she'd been waiting for me to show I still cared. Maybe this dinner was her way of asking if I was still in this with her. Maybe she'd smile when I walked in, maybe she'd reach for my hand. I couldn't help myself. I let the image play out in my head. We'd sit down. There'd be a candle on the table. She'd say something like, "I know we've been off, and I haven't been fair to you." And I'd forgive her, right there, because God knows I was ready to. Maybe we'd talk about starting over. Take a trip. Do the things we kept putting off. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the GPS announced the final turn. Chateau Lumiere stood ahead, glowing in soft amber light like a painting, its windows glowing, couples inside sipping wine, laughing, leaning close. It looked like love. It looked like everything I wanted to believe was still possible. I pulled into the valet line, handed over my keys, and adjusted my shirt once more before stepping onto the sidewalk. The hostess at the front greeted me with a smile, asking for the reservation name. Madison. 7 o'clock, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, checking the screen before offering a warm smile. Right this way, Mr. Blake. She reserved a private room. I blinked. A private room? Maybe this really was something special. As she led me down a quiet hallway, the restaurant sounds faded into soft jazz and clinking cutlery. My shoes clicked on the polished floor. I tried not to read into anything too much, but part of me couldn't help it. Private room? That had to mean something. Right? I straightened my shoulders. My heart thudded against my ribs like it was knocking to get out. I told myself to breathe, to believe, to just hold on. And then the hostess opened the door. And everything I believed in, everything I had dared to hope, collapsed in a single breath. The room was warm, quiet, and smelled faintly of butter and white wine, like the kind of place where memories were supposed to be made, not destroyed. Soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers in the ceiling, the lighting was low and golden, casting everything in the kind of glow that made you feel like you were already in the middle of a beautiful moment. A linen-covered table sat in the center of the room, framed by dark wood panels and a single wall of glass overlooking a small garden with string lights wrapped around bare trees, flickering gently in the wind like something out of a romantic movie. Everything about it was intimate, carefully curated, almost sacred. The kind of space that whispered this matters. I hesitated in the doorway, just for a second. My eyes scanned the room, expecting to find her already seated, maybe sipping a glass of wine, maybe looking up with that rare smile she used to save just for me. But the chair across the table was empty. No coat, no purse. Nothing. Just a single table, a single chair, and a folded white envelope resting neatly in the center of the plate like a final course waiting to be served. The hostess gave me a polite nod and closed the door behind her with a soft click, leaving me standing there in that silence, the hum of jazz wrapping around my thoughts like a noose. I took a slow step forward, trying to convince myself she was just running late, that maybe she'd had to take a call, or got caught in traffic, or anything. But something felt off, too off, and the envelope on the plate sat there like it knew something I didn't. I looked at it, then at the chair, then back at the door, hoping it might open and she'd walk in with some explanation, some reason, something to show this wasn't what it looked like. But the only sound was the faint clinking of silverware from the hallway and the blood rushing in my ears. My heart, so full of stupid hope just minutes ago, started to fold in on itself. I pulled the chair back, sat down slowly, and reached for the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. And suddenly, everything felt cold. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. The envelope sat there so precisely, centered on the plate like it belonged, like it had been placed with care. My name wasn't written on it. There was nothing on the outside, just smooth, unmarked paper. Still, I knew it was for me. There wasn't anyone else this could be for. I hesitated. My hands hovered above it, not quite ready to touch. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a surprise inside. Something thoughtful. A handwritten note telling me to turn around, to follow clues to another room, to find her waiting with a smile. I wanted to believe in the version of her I'd fallen in love with, spontaneous, playful, always chasing big gestures with bigger feelings. I wanted to believe this was one of those moments. But it wasn't. I picked it up, and the air in the room shifted. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the flap and pulled out the papers inside. There were 2 sheets, neatly aligned. The first one I recognized immediately, a formal heading in bold at the top, followed by structured paragraphs of cold legal language. Divorce agreement. Typed out. Signed. Dated. By her. I couldn't breathe. The second page was a handwritten note. Short. Cruel. Her signature scrawl looped at the end like an afterthought. I read it once. Then again. Happy birthday, worthless. Infertile. Unemployed. Just leave. No greeting. No explanation. Just those words. Final. Brutal. My mind went blank. For a moment, all I could hear was the dull rush of blood in my ears, like the room was underwater and I was sinking through it slowly. My body went still. My hands stopped shaking, not from calm, but from something colder, heavier, like shock settling into my bones. 7 years. That's how long we'd been married. 7 years of building a life, or at least trying to. Of weathering job loss, late-night arguments, hopeful doctor visits followed by long, silent car rides home. 7 years of her holding my hand when we thought she might be pregnant. 7 years of me telling her we'd be okay even when I wasn't sure myself. And this was it. This was how she ended it. Not face to face. Not with a conversation, or even a fight. But with a note. On my birthday. I stared at the words until they blurred. My jaw locked. My eyes didn't sting, not yet. I wasn't even sure if I could cry. I was past that, beyond hurt. It felt like someone had taken everything soft in me and scooped it out, leaving something hollow in its place. The door opened again. I didn't look up. "Are you ready to order, sir?" the waiter asked gently. He had no idea. His voice was polite, calm, like nothing was wrong. Like I was just another guy sitting down for a solo dinner. I looked up slowly. He must have seen something in my face, because he hesitated. I glanced at the table, then at the envelope, now resting next to the neatly folded napkin like some morbid place setting. Then I nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'll eat." He nodded, took the silent cue, and left. I didn't know why I said yes. Maybe pride. Maybe spite. Maybe because I didn't want her to win, not tonight. Not like this. I sat there, alone, in a room that smelled like romance and remembered promises, chewing on a dinner she'd probably ordered ahead of time. Chicken and cream sauce. Roasted vegetables stacked like art. It tasted like nothing. Each bite echoed with the sound of metal on porcelain, the only noise in a room built for love. I kept hearing the words. Over and over. Infertile. Unemployed. Worthless. I thought I'd hit bottom months ago when I lost my job. Turns out I hadn't even seen it yet. She dug the grave. All I had to do was sit down. But somewhere in the middle of that cold, silent meal, something stirred. Something small. Something sharp. She thought she'd buried me with that envelope. She had no idea what she'd just unearthed. I folded the papers back into the envelope, slowly, deliberately, like I was handling something radioactive. My hands moved on their own, but my mind was somewhere else, still stuck on that sentence, etched into my skull like graffiti on a crumbling wall. Happy birthday, worthless. Infertile. Unemployed. Just leave. The cruelty of it wasn't even in the words themselves, it was in the ease of them. The way she didn't hesitate to write them down. The way she made sure they were waiting for me here, in this room, on this night, knowing exactly what it would do. She hadn't just left me. She wanted to humiliate me. To erase me. To make sure I understood exactly what I was to her now. Nothing. The waiter returned quietly and placed the first course in front of me without a word. I nodded, not looking at him, and picked up my fork. It was some kind of artfully stacked appetizer, something she would have loved. I chewed slowly, methodically. The taste didn't matter. Texture, seasoning, temperature, it all blurred into the same dull gray sensation. But I ate. Because I could. Because I was still sitting upright. Still breathing. Still here. With every bite, something inside me began to shift. Not with loud rage or a dramatic breakdown. No, it was quieter than that, like steel being forged slowly, layer by layer. She thought she had crushed me. She thought this dinner would be the final nail in the coffin she'd been building for months. But all it did was clarify the truth: she'd already left. Long before this dinner, before the job loss, before the infertility blame. The difference now was, I finally saw it for what it was. All those nights she came home late, saying she stayed behind at work. The way she'd stop talking mid-sentence like I wasn't even worth finishing a thought. The smirk when she saw me applying for another job, the way she never asked how the interviews went. She was waiting for me to give up so she could justify walking away. But I hadn't given up. I was still fighting for a version of us she'd already abandoned. I ate the entire meal. Every last bite. When the waiter came back to ask if I wanted dessert, I almost laughed. Dessert? After that note? I shook my head and paid the bill with what little cash I had in my wallet. Then I stood up, straightened my shirt, and walked out into the night. The air was sharp against my face, the city humming quietly around me. For the first time in months, I felt awake, really awake. Something had broken open inside me, and I could finally breathe. She'd drawn the line. She thought she'd won. But this wasn't my ending. It was the beginning of something she'd never see coming. By the time I got back to my apartment, the city had already settled into its nighttime rhythm, horns quieter, sidewalks thinner, the buzz of nightlife just far enough away to feel like another world. I dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter without looking at it and collapsed onto the couch, still wearing the blue shirt like armor I hadn't taken off yet. The note rang in my head, faint now but still there, like the leftover sting of a slap. But underneath that sting, something else had started to surface, something sharper, more focused. And it pulled my thoughts somewhere else entirely. To Marcus. To the nights in his garage. To the thing we'd been building in secret while the rest of my life was falling apart. 6 months earlier, Marcus, an old college buddy with a sharp mind and zero patience for corporate nonsense, had called me out of the blue. He said he was tired of working for suits and wanted to build something that actually mattered. I was skeptical at first. I had just been laid off, emotionally drained, financially stressed. But the idea sparked something in me. Maybe even saved me. We started slow, late nights, shared pizza, old whiteboards, in a garage that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. We didn't tell anyone. Not because we were hiding, but because we wanted to prove it first, to ourselves. Madison didn't even know. I couldn't bear to watch her roll her eyes at me again. So while she slept, I coded. While she ignored me, I drafted pitches. I learned how to build something from the ground up, brick by digital brick. And it worked. A week before that dinner, we'd landed a major deal. $8 million in seed funding. Real money. Real validation. I had gone from unemployed to co-founder of something people were actually betting on. Madison thought she was walking away from a failure. She had no idea she was leaving behind a man who was just getting started. That memory, of the night Marcus and I closed the deal, hit me like a light cutting through fog. It was just a week before that birthday dinner, but it already felt like a lifetime ago. We were in his tiny kitchen, eating takeout straight from the containers, when the final confirmation email came through. $8 million. Investors who saw the same potential we did. I remember staring at the screen, reading the numbers 3 times before I could believe them. It wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. My name was on the paperwork. 40% equity. Co-founder. After months of uncertainty and self-doubt, I had built something from scratch, something with value, with momentum. It was legitimate. Not a side project. Not a distraction. A company. A future. Marcus stood up and shouted something ridiculous, fist-pumping like we'd won the Super Bowl. I didn't say much. I just smiled, leaned back, and felt this quiet wave of pride roll over me. Not because of the money, but because I hadn't given up when it would have been so easy to. It was strange, thinking about it now, how in that same week, I'd reached a peak in a valley without realizing they were tied to the same moment. While Madison was planning my public humiliation, I was unknowingly sitting on one of the most important wins of my life. She thought she was discarding a man at his lowest. But she was walking away from someone she didn't even know anymore. And the part that made me pause, the part that made my jaw tighten, was knowing she would have benefited from it all. The money. The growth. The next chapter. Instead, she handed me freedom on a plate next to a divorce letter. And it was the best damn gift I'd ever received. Back in the dim light of my apartment, I leaned against the counter and looked around at the place I used to call ours. Her touch was still everywhere, the framed photos on the shelves, the set of wine glasses she'd insisted we buy from that overpriced boutique, the throw pillows I never understood but she said made the space feel more intentional. Now it all felt staged, like I was standing on the abandoned set of someone else's life. Madison didn't know anything. She thought she was leaving a man who'd peaked years ago. A washed-up, jobless disappointment who'd failed to deliver the life she thought she deserved. She probably told herself I was still sitting on the couch in that same ratty t-shirt, scrolling job boards, hoping someone would give me a second chance. Maybe she even pitied me in some twisted, condescending way. But while she was rehearsing her exit, I was quietly building something stronger than any apology she'd never given me. And the most ironic part? She had absolutely no clue who had invested in our company. I hadn't paid much attention to the full list of backers at first. Marcus handled the pitch meetings, the handshakes, the FaceTime. I was the behind-the-scenes guy, the late-night coder, the numbers brain. But somewhere in that investor list sat a name that was going to change everything. I hadn't noticed it before. But I would soon. And when I did, I'd realized just how deep the betrayal went, and how perfectly poetic her downfall would be. The truth was, Madison thought she was walking away from ashes. But what she left behind was fire. And it was only just starting to burn. A few days later, I was sitting at Marcus's place, half listening as he rattled off updates about upcoming meetings and product tweaks, when something he said caught my attention mid-sip of coffee. And Trevor Wolf wants to have a one-on-one with us next week, biggest investor, so I figured we should actually show our faces. I looked up slowly, the name echoing in my head like a misplaced sound in a familiar room. Trevor Wolf? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Yeah, Marcus replied, not picking up on the tension. Some real estate hotshot. Owns half the skyline in Dallas. The guy threw in the biggest chunk of the seed round. Never met him in person, but I guess he's been watching us for a while. And just like that, the pieces clicked into place. Trevor Wolf. The name I'd seen in texts Madison once tried to hide. The man behind those late work dinners. The guy she laughed about too hard when I asked who he was. I remembered now, he was the loud, confident type at networking events, all teeth and Rolex, talking about legacies and portfolios while everyone else fought for his attention. Madison had traded me in for him. And now he was unknowingly helping fund the very life she tried to erase. It was surreal. Almost cinematic. She thought she'd upgraded, left the worthless, unemployed husband behind for a power player with deep pockets and connections. And yet here I was, co-founder of the company he was backing with his money. Money that would pay for my future, my home, my freedom. He didn't know. She didn't know. Nobody did. And I wasn't about to tell them. I leaned back in the chair and nodded at Marcus like everything was normal. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I used to be. What I felt now was cooler. Sharper. It was control. And it tasted better than revenge ever could. Let them play house. Let her smile on his arm, tell him stories about her poor, broken ex-husband who couldn't give her what she wanted. Let him believe he'd saved her. I didn't need to expose her. I didn't need to prove anything. All I had to do was build. Because eventually, the truth always finds its way out. And when it did, they'd both realize exactly who they'd underestimated. The memory came back when I least expected it, just a flicker at first. I was scrolling through old messages, clearing out junk from my phone, when I found it, a simple "hope you're feeling better" text from Marcus, dated about 3 months before the birthday dinner. That was the night I'd ended up in the ER. Stress had been clawing at my chest for weeks, and I finally hit a wall, shortness of breath, dizzy, my vision narrowing like a tunnel collapsing in. Madison wasn't home when it happened. I'd called her on the way to the hospital. She didn't answer. Just a text, a few minutes later: "Sorry, working late. Can't leave. You okay?" At the time, I told myself it made sense. She was under pressure, too. Maybe she really couldn't leave work. I spent that night alone in a sterile room, for in my arm, heart monitor beeping softly beside me. The nurse told me I was lucky it wasn't a full-blown heart attack. I laughed and told her that kind of luck felt like a cruel joke. But now, months later, something about that night felt off, worse than I remembered. The next morning, I dug deeper. I still had access to our shared cloud account. She'd never changed the password. Part of me wasn't even looking for anything specific. Just a feeling I needed to prove wrong. I opened her photo backups. My stomach dropped. There it was. A selfie. Taken the same night I was lying alone in that hospital bed. She was at a resort spa, dim lighting, glass of wine in hand, hair wrapped in a towel, a robe slipped off one shoulder like she was posing for someone. Her smile wasn't casual. It was flirtatious. Directed at whoever was holding the camera. The photo was geotagged. Not near her office. Not even in Austin. She was out of town. With him. Trevor. My hands went cold, but my face didn't change. I just stared at the screen as something inside me hardened, like concrete setting in a mold I didn't realize had been there all along. She hadn't just left me. She hadn't just humiliated me. She'd abandoned me, at my weakest, at my most vulnerable, and traded me in for a new life before I even knew I'd been replaced. Whatever was left of me, the part that still clung to hope, to history, to the illusion of who she used to be, snapped clean in half that night. And once it broke, I didn't want it back. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought knowing she'd abandoned me during a hospital visit, choosing a spa weekend with her new fling over my health, was the bottom of the pit. But I hadn't seen the whole drop yet. That came a few weeks later, on a Friday afternoon that should have been forgettable. Marcus and I were wrapping up a late investor call at a cafe downtown when a shadow fell across our table. I looked up, and there he was, Trevor Wolfe, standing stiff in his custom suit, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight I could practically hear his teeth grinding. Before I could even say a word, he leaned in, low but sharp. "You disgust me," he said. "Hitting a woman like that? You're lucky I don't end this in the parking lot." The words didn't register right away. Hitting? Abuse? What the hell are you talking about? I asked, standing slowly, my voice flat, heart starting to race, not from fear, but from the cold rush of confusion. He scoffed, pulled out his phone, and tapped it open like he was holding proof in his hands. "Madison showed me everything. Your texts. The threats. The photos of the bruises. She's terrified of you." I stared at him, stunned. For a second, it felt like I'd left my body. Not from guilt, because I knew exactly who I was, but from the realization of what she'd done. The layers of betrayal weren't just personal anymore. She wasn't content with discarding me. She needed to rewrite the story entirely, to turn me into a monster so she could play the victim. She had forged texts. Maybe even hurt herself. All to make me look like the villain in a story she had carefully rewritten to suit her exit strategy. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't lunge. I just looked at him, calm and steady. "Check your inbox, Trevor," I said quietly. "You're funding my company." He blinked. "What?" "You heard me. That startup you just dumped 7 figures into? I co-founded it. You've been backing me this whole time. So if you're gonna throw a punch, make sure it doesn't hit your own investment." I turned, leaving him standing there speechless, jaw half open, eyes calculating. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. I didn't need to justify myself. The truth had already started to crack through. She could lie. She could forge. She could twist stories. But she couldn't change reality. And reality was finally catching up. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, small at first, like distant thunder, then louder, faster, until the whole thing cracked open like a dam giving way. I didn't hear it from her. Of course not. But whispers started trickling in through people who still floated on the edges of our old social circles. People who didn't know the full story, but had caught enough smoke to know there was fire somewhere close. It started with Trevor. A friend of a friend told Marcus that Trevor had pulled out of a high-profile gala last minute, one he and Madison were supposed to host together. That same week, he canceled a massive property deal and went off-grid. By the time the rumors reached me, it was already unraveling. Trevor had found out. Not just about the lies she told him about me. Not just about the fake texts or bruises. He found out the truth about the infertility. The reports. The specialists. Everything she let me carry, the blame, the shame, the sideways looks from her family. Trevor now knew it had never been my body that failed. It had been hers. And she'd known for years. I don't know how he found out. Maybe she cracked under pressure. Maybe someone showed him the paperwork. All I know is, the moment he realized the truth, he dropped her like dead weight. No calls. No warning. Just a black car pulling up to their shared penthouse and a staffer handing her a manila envelope while the locks were changed behind her. That was the beginning of the end. Her friends, the ones who used to sip mimosas with her and post filtered brunch photos, went silent. Some blocked her. Others just ghosted. Turns out, high society only loves a winner, and once Madison was no longer arm candy for Austin's loudest investor, her sparkle dulled fast. She tried to hold on. Drain the rest of her savings. Moved from luxury to temporary rentals. Tried to crawl her way back into parties and fundraisers, clinging to relevance with manicured fingertips. But the doors stopped opening. She wasn't just broke, she was radioactive. Nobody wanted to be associated with a scandalous ex who lied about abuse, sabotaged 2 men's reputations, and burned every bridge on the way down. And I didn't have to do a thing. She lit the match. She poured the gasoline. All I did was step out of the way and let gravity take care of the rest. By then, I wasn't looking for anything. Not love. Not closure. Not even company. After everything with Madison, my emotional muscles were worn thin, stretched, bruised, and barely functioning. I'd stopped trying to explain it to people. Some pain you don't talk through, you just carry it until it softens enough to forget it's there. Marcus had dragged me to a charity gala, one of those black tie events our company was now expected to sponsor. "You can't keep hiding behind spreadsheets and code," he said. "Put on a tux. Drink something overpriced. Smile like you mean it." I wasn't in the mood to mingle, but I went. Out of obligation. And maybe, deep down, because I wanted to prove to myself I could still exist in a room full of people without unraveling. That's when I saw her. She wasn't surrounded by a crowd. She wasn't dressed to steal attention. A simple black dress, hair pinned up in a way that looked accidental but probably wasn't. She stood near the silent auction table, listening patiently as some guy in a loud tie rambled about tax benefits. But she didn't look bored. She looked present. That's what struck me first, how grounded she seemed in a room full of floating egos. I caught her eye by accident. She held my gaze for half a second longer than expected, then smiled, not forced or flirtatious, but real. Uncomplicated. I don't remember walking over. I just remember standing next to her and blurting out something about how ridiculous the shrimp appetizers were. She laughed, a low, honest sound that didn't try to impress anyone. That laugh hit something in me I didn't even know still worked. Her name was Elena. A corporate attorney, sharp but soft-spoken. She believed in causes, not headlines. She listened more than she talked. And when she spoke, she didn't waste words. We stood there for a long time, just talking. Not performing. Not dancing around intentions. It wasn't romantic, not right away. But it was solid. Ground level. The kind of connection that doesn't try to prove itself, it just is. Later that night, walking back to my car, I realized my chest didn't feel heavy. My thoughts weren't circling Madison or Trevor or any of the wreckage I'd been dragging behind me. All I could think about was how easy it had been to be myself again. And how, for the first time in a long while, I actually wanted to see someone again. Not to fix me. But to just be with. The first time I asked Elena out, I did it without overthinking. No scripts, no polished lines, just a text the next morning, coffee? No shrimp this time, I promise. She replied 2 minutes later, only if it's terrible diner coffee. None of that hipster pour-over stuff. That's how it started. No fanfare. No pretense. Just two people sitting across from each other in a worn-down booth, the table slightly wobbly, a chipped mug warming my hands while she told me about her dog growing up and the time she accidentally served wine to a judge during her intern years. The second time, it was a bookstore. She loved fiction, stories that made her feel something. She picked out a novel for me and dared me to read it without checking my phone. I picked one for her, too, some quirky sci-fi thing that made her roll her eyes, but she bought it anyway. We walked out into the cold, coffee cups in hand, laughing about how she'd probably never finish it. We didn't talk about heavy things at first. We just enjoyed the silence between words. And that silence never felt awkward. It took 3 more of those quiet, ordinary moments before I started opening up. We were walking along the river one evening, the sky soft with dusk, city lights flickering to life behind us. She asked about my startup, how I'd gotten into it. I paused, then told her. Not just about the company, but the layoff. The divorce. The hospital visit. The envelope on the plate. I didn't dramatize it. I just let it spill, the way you talk about a storm that's already passed but left your house in ruins. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer pity, or cluck her tongue in that way people do when they want to sound empathetic but don't really get it. She just listened. And when I finished, she nodded slowly and said, "That sounds like it broke you in a few places." "It did," I said. "And you're still standing. That's something." That was it. No follow-up questions. No gasps of horror or awkward change of topic. Just steady, calm presence. The kind of presence that tells you, you don't have to be fine for me to stay. We kept walking. She slid her hand into mine like it belonged there, no ceremony. Just warmth. That night, lying in bed, I didn't think about what came next. I didn't wonder where it was going or if I could trust it. I just thought about how light I felt. How, after everything, someone saw the cracked parts of me and didn't flinch. There's a certain kind of healing that doesn't come from therapy or revenge or new beginnings wrapped in fireworks. Sometimes, it comes from the quiet miracle of being understood. And with Elena, that miracle didn't feel rare. It just felt real. The hardest part wasn't falling for Elena. It was allowing myself to believe that what we were building wasn't just another illusion waiting to crack. Even with her calm presence and steady kindness, there were moments, quiet, creeping ones, when the old doubts came back. Like a reflex I couldn't shake. A long silence in a text thread would make my stomach turn. A late meeting would tighten my chest. I didn't voice these thoughts often. I didn't want to punish her for scars someone else had left. But Elena saw them anyway. She never tried to fix me. She just stayed. Consistent. Present. The kind of present that didn't demand updates or apologies. When I pulled back, she didn't chase, but she didn't disappear either. She let me find my own pace, and when I was ready, she was always right there, book in hand, tea steaming, eyes patient. One night, after we'd been together for a few months, I told her everything. The worst parts. The panic attacks. The photo I found while hooked up to hospital monitors. The fake texts. The fake bruises. How I'd been turned into someone I didn't even recognize in someone else's story. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just reached across the couch, took my hand, and said, "I'm not her." That simple. That honest. I nodded. I knew. But hearing it still mattered. After that, something shifted. I stopped waiting for her to leave. I stopped flinching at every quiet moment, stopped second-guessing kindness. I started trusting that not every smile came with a price. That not every woman who says I'm here means until I find something better. Love after betrayal is quiet. It's not the rush of butterflies or big gestures. It's rebuilding the walls from the inside out, brick by brick, with someone who holds the light while you work. That's what Elena became, my anchor. Not because she carried me, but because she reminded me I could still stand. I had survived the storm. Now, with her, I was learning how to live in the calm. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the quiet. It happened on a Thursday. Nothing special about the day, no holiday, no big milestone, just one of those evenings where the air felt soft and the world moved a little slower. Elena had cooked one of her chaotic pasta experiments, half the noodles stuck together, and the sauce leaned way too heavy on garlic, but I'd eaten every bite like it was 5-star. She laughed when I went back for seconds, tossing a towel at my head as she teased, "You're just trying to flatter the chef." We curled up on her worn-out couch afterward, the TV playing some old comedy we'd both seen too many times to really pay attention. Her feet were tucked under my thigh, and she was halfway through a monologue about the ethics of true crime podcasts when I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the box. I'd been carrying it for weeks. Waiting for the right time. Then I realized, there wasn't going to be a perfect moment. No rooftop, no orchestra, no dramatic speech. Just us. Just this. And it felt right. I didn't even pause the TV. "Elena," I said, cutting gently through her sentence. She looked over, brow raised, smile already playing at the edge of her mouth. "Yeah?" I pulled the box out and opened it without flourish. No bending knee. No spotlight. Just heart. "Marry me," I said. Quiet. Honest. She froze, not out of hesitation, but out of something deeper. Her eyes searched mine like she was reading between the lines, making sure this wasn't a dream we hadn't said out loud yet. Then she smiled. The real one. The one that always broke past everything else. "Yes," she whispered, just as softly. I slid the ring onto her finger, simple, understated, exactly her. No gasps, no applause. Just the warmth of her hand in mine and the feeling of something settling into place. We sat like that for a while, not needing to fill the silence. The world outside kept spinning, the show kept playing, and the pasta dishes stayed piled in the sink. But right there, in that imperfect little apartment, something in me exhaled for the first time in years. This wasn't redemption. It was peace. And it was ours. The ceremony wasn't in a cathedral or a ballroom or some destination vineyard with drone cameras and a guest list full of strangers. It was by the river, just a quiet bend where the trees bowed toward the water and the breeze carried more calm than sound. We rented a small clearing near a park Elena loved, strung up some lights between the branches, and laid out folding chairs on the grass. There were only 30 people. No plus ones for networking, no coworkers we hadn't spoken to in months. Just the ones who mattered. Marcus stood beside me as best man, grinning like he'd bet on the right horse and finally got to collect. Elena's sister read something she'd written, soft and honest, the kind of words that didn't try to impress but still hit deep. Elena walked down the makeshift aisle in a simple white dress that didn't sparkle, didn't scream, but stopped time anyway. She wasn't trying to look like a magazine cover. She just looked like her, calm, sure, radiant in that quiet, grounding way that had drawn me in from the start. I watched her walk toward me, and for a moment, the world narrowed down to just the sound of her steps in the grass and the way her eyes never looked away from mine. My heart didn't pound with nerves. It settled. Like it had been waiting for this exact moment to find its rhythm again. The vows weren't dramatic. We didn't promise eternity or perfection. We promised honesty, patience, and to keep choosing each other even when life got loud. She said, "You're not my rescue story, you're the reason I stopped trying to outrun myself." I told her, "You're not the end of my pain, but the beginning of something that makes it all worth carrying." When we kissed, the crowd clapped. But more than that, they smiled, those full, real smiles that don't need to be prompted. And standing there with her hand in mine, I realized something I hadn't even noticed until that very second. For the first time in years, I wasn't comparing this to anything else. I wasn't thinking about Madison. About Trevor. About that night in the restaurant or the note on the plate or the storm I'd crawled through. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about peace. About finally choosing the life I wanted, not the one I'd been chasing, not the one someone else told me I should have. Just this. A simple riverside ceremony with people who knew the real me. And a woman who never asked me to be anything else. We danced barefoot under the string lights. Ate cupcakes instead of a tiered cake. Played a playlist we made together on a Bluetooth speaker that cut out once, then came right back like it didn't want to miss a thing. No chaos. No shadows. Just joy. The kind that doesn't crash in with thunder. The kind that arrives quietly, and stays. It came a week after the wedding. A Monday morning like any other, gray light slipping through the blinds, coffee brewing in the kitchen, Elena humming to herself as she folded laundry on the couch. I sat at my desk, sifting through a cluttered inbox of contracts, investor follow-ups, and calendar invites. Nothing unusual. Until I saw it. Subject line, "Please. Can we talk?" The sender? Madison or Wolf. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. There was no tremble in my hand, no fury in my chest. Just stillness. A cool, detached silence inside me, like someone knocking on a door I'd bricked over long ago. I hovered over the subject line for a second. Not out of temptation, but out of memory. She used to send me notes like that early in our marriage. "Can we talk?" meant something then. It meant we were still trying. But now? It was just noise. One more last-ditch reach from someone who had burned the bridge, drowned the river beneath it, and expected me to meet her on the other side. She hadn't changed. That email was never about making peace. It was about access. It was about control. It was about slipping back into the life she thought would wait for her after the lies, after the erasure, after everything. But I had already said everything I needed to say. With silence. With survival. With joy she couldn't touch. I moved the cursor to the trash icon and clicked. Gone. No drama. No reply. No explanation. And just like that, the last thread between us finally snapped. Behind me, Elena laughed softly at something on the TV, and I turned away from the screen. From the past. From her. The door was already closed. And I didn't need to lock it. I hadn't been back to the old neighborhood in over a year. The streets looked smaller than I remembered, tighter somehow, like the houses had all shifted closer in the time I'd been gone. I parked at the curb outside the duplex we used to rent, the one with the cracked driveway and the rusted mailbox that always leaned a little to the left. Everything looked the same. And none of it felt familiar. I stepped out of the car and took a slow walk down the block. The same dog barked behind the same fence. The same couple still argued about trash days across the street. Somewhere, a lawnmower hummed lazily in the distance. The world hadn't noticed I left. But I had. I paused in front of the old house, staring at the window that used to be our bedroom. I remembered the nights I'd lie awake there, staring at the ceiling fan turning above me, wondering what I was doing wrong. Wondering why the woman I loved felt like a ghost in the same room. I remembered the arguments. The silences that said more than any fight. The scent of unfamiliar cologne that clung to her late-night clothes. The note on the plate. And then I remembered walking out of that house with a single duffel bag and a heart that barely beat for itself. If someone had told me then what was coming, the startup, the rebirth, the peace, I don't think I could have believed it. Back then, I didn't even know I deserved better. But standing here now, I did. Not because I rebuilt my life out of revenge. But because I stopped letting someone else write my story. The pain didn't kill me. The betrayal didn't break me. I didn't crumble the way she thought I would. I bent, sure. I fell. But I got up, slower than I wanted, more painfully than I expected, but I got up. And I didn't just survive. I grew. The words came to me like a whisper I'd heard before, buried deep in some forgotten part of me. I said them aloud, not to anyone, just to the air, to the sky, to the version of myself that used to live behind that glass. She tried to bury me, but I was the seed. I turned away, walked back toward the car, the late afternoon sun soft on my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. Madison was gone. Her ghost no longer followed me. Her voice no longer echoed in my chest. My life had moved forward. Not to prove her wrong, but to finally become mine. The city stretched out beneath us, all lights and movement, a living canvas we'd stopped trying to control. The windows of the penthouse reflected it all back, gold and steel, the rhythm of a world still rushing, but in our home, everything felt still. Elena sat across from me, legs folded under her on the couch, a half-empty plate of pasta resting on her lap. I had sauce on my shirt again, of course, and she was laughing, head back, eyes glowing, the kind of laughter that didn't ask for permission. "This is why we don't let you near the stove," she said, tossing a napkin at me like she had 100 times before. "You say that," I replied, "but you still married me." She grinned. "Because you're entertaining. Not because you're useful." We both laughed. It was a joke, but underneath it was something solid, something real. Not performance. Not survival. Just us. After dinner, I leaned back in my chair and watched her wander around the kitchen, humming as she rinsed plates. The ring on her finger caught the light. I looked at her, really looked, and for a long moment, I didn't think about where I'd come from. I didn't hear Madison's voice. I didn't feel the old weight I used to carry in my chest like wet concrete. I just felt light. This wasn't healing in the way people like to picture it. It didn't come with closure speeches or dramatic forgiveness. It came slowly, in the quiet. In all the days where I didn't talk about the past because I didn't need to. In the laughter that didn't sound like armor. In the kind of love that didn't demand explanation, it simply existed, steady and unshaken. I hadn't built this life out of vengeance. That's what surprised me the most. I thought for a long time that success would taste sweeter if she had to watch it. That if Madison saw me now, strong, loved, thriving, that would be justice. But the real peace came the moment I stopped caring whether she ever saw it at all. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to her. Not to anyone. Let her spin her lies into empty rooms. Let Trevor forget her name. Let her wonder what could have been. That was her story to carry now, not mine. Mine was here, in this warm apartment, with dinner on the table and a woman who never made me doubt whether I was enough. I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had outgrown it. So now I'll ask you something that I've been turning over in my own mind ever since that night at the restaurant. What would you do if the person you trusted most destroyed you? Not just disappointed you. Not just let you down. I'm talking about cut you open from the inside, left you bleeding where your heart used to live. If someone you built your life around threw it all away, handed you a goodbye folded neatly on a dinner plate like a final insult, what would you do? Would you fight back? Tear through the wreckage, demanding to be heard, to be seen, to make them feel even a fraction of what you did? Or, would you rise, quietly, without ever looking back? I had to answer that question for myself, and it changed everything. Now I want to hear from you. Listen, if you've made it this far, I want you to hear something loud and clear, because maybe no one's ever said it to you before. You are not broken just because someone gave up on you. I don't care what they said when they left. I don't care what they whispered behind your back or what names they threw at you like stones. Their inability to love you the right way does not mean you are unlovable. It means they weren't capable. That's not your weight to carry. And I know it hurts. God, I know. I know what it feels like to sit in a room and realize the person you trusted the most just lit a match and walked away while everything burned. I know how heavy it is to wake up in a life that no longer feels like yours. But let me tell you something that no one told me when I was lying on that hospital bed, when I was holding that note at a dinner table set for one, when I was packing my life into a bag I bought at a gas station. The story doesn't end there. They walked away. They left. They let go. But you? You're still here. And that means the pen is still in your hand. You still get to write the rest of the story. You don't need to chase revenge. You don't need to show up at their door with proof of how far you've come. You don't even need to hope they see your glow up one day and feel regret. That's not where your peace lives. Your peace is in the quiet mornings when you pour your coffee and don't have to explain yourself anymore. Your peace is in the person who listens to you without judgment. In the work you're proud of. In the way your heart beats a little steadier now that it's no longer begging someone else to stay. You can rebuild, brick by brick, moment by moment. You can become someone stronger, quieter, sharper. Someone who smiles not because life is perfect, but because you know you made it through the worst of it and you didn't disappear. And if you're still in the middle of the wreckage, if you're sitting on the couch, wondering how the hell to get up again, I want you to know. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be angry. But you are not allowed to believe that this is where your story ends. You deserve more than survival. You deserve joy. You deserve peace. You deserve to sit across from someone who looks at you and sees the whole picture and chooses to stay anyway. The road to that life? It's not instant. It's not flashy. It's made of tiny choices. Tiny moments of courage. Like getting out of bed. Like saying no. Like hitting delete on an email that once would have wrecked you. That's healing. That's power. That's yours now. So stand up. Not to fight them. But to fight for you. Because here's the truth no one talks about. They didn't bury you. They planted you. And brother, it's time to grow. Drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been betrayed like that? How did you rise? Or are you still learning how to? Your story might be the one another man out there needs to hear. Someone who's still in the middle of it. Still bleeding. Still searching. Because healing isn't just about getting even. Sometimes, it's about becoming someone they never saw coming.